Bore da a croeso cynnes webinar Fforwm Seilwaith Werth Cymru. Good morning and a very warm welcome to the Wales Green Infrastructure Forum webinar. Now, I first became aware of community managed green space back in the 1980s when I went down to Barry to talk to the Woodlands Residents Association down there, who were managing Cwmtalwg Local Nature Reserve. And then I ended up in Newcastle on Tyne and got introduced to Benwell Local Nature Park, right up in the middle of the city, that was managed by the local community. Now, over the past decade or more of austerity, interest from local authorities in community managed green spaces has really increased, but there's a heck of a lot more to it than simply saving money. And today, Lucie Taylor, Community Land Advisory Service Cymru Coordinator, is going to introduce us to the many benefits to people and nature of community managed green space. Before I hand over to Lucie, here's how the webinar is going to work. So Lucie's going to speak for 20 minutes. And whilst Lucie's speaking, I'd like us all to mute our microphones and our cameras, because otherwise, every time next door dog barks, it's going to interfere with the webinar feed. While Lucie's speaking, please use the chat function in Zoom to post any questions that you've got for Lucie. And if there are any problems with the way that the webinar is working, please post those in the chat function. I'll monitor them and I'll do my best to resolve any problems. Once Lucie's finished, we'll move into the discussion session, and I'll ask those of you that have posted questions in the chat to unmute your camera and unmute your microphone and ask those questions to Lucie. So hopefully it will become more of a dialogue. That's inevitably going to spark off more questions. So if you haven't actually written a question in the chat, at that point, please use Zoom's virtual hand raising function to let me know that you've got a question, and I'll come to you and ask you to unmute and ask the question to Lucie. At some point during the discussion, we'll probably get cut off because we'll only have 20 minutes for it. Or if you get cut off for any other reason, just end your meeting on Zoom and then dial straight back in again using the link that you used to connect to us now. And that should give us a lot more time to finish our discussion. But whatever happens, we will finish by 11 o'clock this morning. And over the next couple of days, I will post a recording of this webinar and the discussion on our YouTube channel. So those who couldn't make it today will be able to get the benefit of what Lucie's come to talk to us about. So if there are no questions about how the meeting is going to work this morning, can I ask us all to mute our microphones and our cameras, and I'll hand over to Lucie Taylor, Community Land Advisory Service Cymru Coordinator. Lucie, over to you.
If you can let me share.
There we go. That should be set up for you now.
Great, thank you. Can everybody see that first slide?
That's coming through on my screen. Thanks very much, Lucie.
Okay. Let's just do that. Right, well, good morning and welcome to this Green Infrastructure Forum session on community managed green spaces. I'm going to do a quick intro to social farms and gardens and then play two very short films from projects we have awarded a community management award to, and then a few slides after that. So just to start, the Community Land Advisory Service is managed by Social Farms and Gardens, and I've been the coordinator since 2013 when we were awarded big lottery funding for 5 years. And then in 2018, Landscape and Outdoor Recreation branch of Welsh Government funded us to increase land for all increase access to land for all community-led green space projects. And demand really means that 90% of those projects have some type of community food growing attached to them. But our support for projects does range from community-supported farms to community allotments, orchards, woodlands, wildflower meadows, and tiny raised bed growing spaces as well, or just sort of grass verge, sort of biodiversity projects, for instance. And the support we provide is all around gaining access to land, so finding, helping find land through public and private sector landowners, gaining leases, licenses to occupy, and planning permissions. That's my background. I'm a town planner by trade, and worked in local government for planning departments, a little bit in the private sector, but in local government planning departments for about 15 years. So just moving on to the slide which shows you the two little films. So I thought, rather than telling you about all the merits of community managed spaces, I thought I'd show you two very short films from the 15 projects we awarded community management awards to. And when I say me, I mean Social Farms and Gardens, and that happened last month on the 16th of March. Each project was asked to make a short 1-minute film about their project, and during the awards ceremony, the projects really became the stars of the show. And I thought, what better way really to show you what the benefits of community managed spaces are by showing you these short films. So here we go. If there's a problem with the sound, I think I'm not quite sure I clicked on the correct thing. If there's a problem with the sound, Pete, perhaps you would let me know, and I'll come out and click on the right icon if I haven't done it already.
Thanks, Lucy. Will do.
You hear that?
Unfortunately, no, the sound hasn't come through, so you may have to go back.
Right. Yeah, I didn't click on I don't think I had clicked on the correct thing. Hang on. Need to be able to stop share. That'll help. Right.
It's
Share
like one of those Harry Potter things where you have to give the incantation in exactly the right order.
Yes, indeed. Right. Okay, this should work now. Can you see that all right?
I can see that, thanks.
Okay.
We are the Wallich's Carmarthenshire Wellbeing Project. Our allotment is based in Llanelli, Carmarthenshire, and the land is owned by Pentlagetla Trust. Over the autumn-winter months, we've been busy installing the Keep Wells Tidy package, building a greenhouse, laying wildflower turf, installing trellis, planting climbing trees, fruit trees, and sowing a variety of seeds. We are preparing at the moment, but in the summer months, we want to give back to the local community. We're here no matter the weather, but if the weather is too bad, we take comfort in the shed. From creative activities, learning about various gardening methods, to just a cup of tea and a chat. This allotment has been a real lifeline for the people we support.
I'm a client of the Warwick, and I attend the allotment because I find it very good for my mental well-being. I love being involved with the allotment. I feel part of the community. There's a real community spirit within the allotment. I've met people that I wouldn't have met otherwise. It does make me feel more positive about myself, that I can contribute something. I do have some knowledge of gardening, so I can pass that on. I feel useful and I feel part of something. is really nice to feel.
Well, I think the most important thing we're growing here is community.
This is the project called Fruit and Nut, just outside Kilgarran, next to the football pitch. This is Pembrokeshire, and this is the County Council land.
O'n i yma yn Clwb Ffrwyth a Chnau yng Nghylgeran, Gogledd Sir Benfro. Dyma map o'r safle a fi nath hon.
So we've got a 5-year licence with the Community Council in Kilgarran to use this piece of land, and we approached them and asked them whether we could use a piece of their land for community growing project. We asked for a piece of land right in the middle of the village, but they were using that for something else, so they offered us this abandoned piece of land which is at the back of the football pitch just outside the village.
Now that we are at a community garden, we get to see lots of people, and sometimes we get to make new friends.
I really like coming for the cake. There's always good cake. And especially, it's a real place to be free. Sometimes you can get stuck in and pull out loads of brambles and feel like you're making a difference. Sometimes it's nice to just sit and enjoy the bird song and have a nice chat and feel listened to and appreciated. It's a great community feeling, and there's some lovely people up here doing some really good stuff, and it's good to be part of that.
So I'm gonna leave that there, rather than. But I hope that gave you a nice flavour of the type of benefits and things that people get from these community managed spaces. Just moving on. This is a word cloud that I've managed to create of the dialogue provided of the 15 short films, telling us about their use of the spaces and what they get from it. And yeah, I just thought some of the words that came out were a really important, great part of the story, really, of how they are managing and enjoying these spaces. The main reason, I suppose, that's why people want to access these spaces is perhaps because the space is underutilized, and they want their land around where they live to provide a better facility representing the needs and desires of their community. But with the greater awareness of the changes and the crises going on in the world, people initially want to feel more resilient to change and to build something new using their own ideas into something positive for the area. Once they get a fork in the ground, the benefits become abundant. Socially, people feel far less isolated and connected to the people and nature around them. They feel a sense of purpose and pride. All the projects I've ever encountered want to work with nature rather than against it. They use peat-free soil, they rainwater harvest, they create places for pollination, bug hotels and beehives. Many people feel they have acquired a new range of skills and want to share their knowledge so that people acquire those same skills. Some people, like Cynnan Valley Organic Adventures in Rhondda and Taff, provide accredited courses, outdoor classrooms for excluded children, and help people get back into work. I'm just going to show you now that many of the projects that we work with complete a site resilience plan. All the annual awardees of the Community Managed Green Spaces do. And the reasons why social farms and gardens support them to do this is so that they can show funders and decision makers how aligned they are with the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So it's kind of like showing a way of how they're helping public bodies through the work that they're doing. And I think it's also important method of them articulating that, because quite often the benefits are so sort of intangible. It's nice to get something like this written down on paper. So what you'll see over the next few slides is screenshots I've taken from one of the awardee projects from this year, based in Bygylch in North Wales. So this is their sort of their front page, and then they move in then to talking about you know, the various sort of goals under the under the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Just gonna so you can see in this slide and the next few screenshots that I've taken, things like talking about a resilient Wales. They answer questions around biodiversity and care for the soil, and what they do to improve drainage and water availability on site. And it's about what they're doing now and getting them to think about how they might do those things in the future. Because obviously a lot of the projects we support at the Community Land Advisory Service have just acquired the land. So, but it's surprising how well they're already doing with these sort of goals and aims. You know, so from you know, a healthier Wales perspective, they're demonstrating how people use the spaces and benefiting mentally and physically, as well as making sure health and safety is considered. In terms of a more equal Wales, they need to show that the project is community sort of owned and managed, and all profits go back into the project. They also need to sort of show where was I? Sorry, I've just lost my way. That they also need to sort of show, for instance, a more equal Wales, that you know, the opportunity to demonstrate what learning and training is taking place on the site. And then sort of a cohesive Wales, they need to show that they're complying with their green flag community award criteria, and providing signage to the site and interpretation around that site, how they're engaging with local groups and stakeholders, and encouraging others to come and join them. A Wales of thriving culture and Welsh language. We ask groups to demonstrate how they're embracing local heritage and culture, from the native variety of seeds and trees to use of Welsh language in their work. A globally responsible Wales. As you can see here, groups show that how they're harvesting rainwater, reusing old items and recycling waste. And it's usually at this point a passion for composting comes out. Nearly all the groups that do some sort of composting, and they really get into that aspect of the gardens. And then prosperous Wales, finally, projects are asked to demonstrate how they use local businesses and how they're creating skills for the future, and encouraging others, not just within the project, but outside the project, to reduce their carbon footprint. So yeah, quite a wide-ranging thing for them to be able to show the, you know, public sector partners. In this slide, I just wanted to sort of touch on, you know, the fact that perhaps we need to see a bit more of this, along with settlement extensions and meeting housing needs. This is the first sort of image on the left is a sort of screenshot from the Edinburgh Food Growing Strategy, which has identified existing as well as potential food growing sites across the city. Scotland are leading the way really on this through the Community Empowerment Act 2015, which requires local authorities to prepare food growing strategies for their areas, and to identify land that may be used as allotment sites, identify other areas of land that could be used for food growing, and describe how the authority intends to increase provision for community growing, and in particular in areas of social and economic disadvantage. excuse me. Then there's the image on the right. It's taken from the Brighton and Hove Planning Advisory Note on food growing and development. It was updated in September 2020, so it takes into account, you know, things that have happened since the pandemic. And they here refer to the Hull Residential Design Guide, which provides illustrations of how food growing can be incorporated in even the smallest of housing developments. Lots is going on around Wales and the UK. And indeed, today one of our Wales managers has gone up to London supporting the founder of the Incredible Edible movement to persuade peers in House of Lords of a right to grow on land that is not being used or developed. It's an ambitious suggestion and one that perhaps we may not be quite ready for here in Wales, but we need to certainly be thinking about community food growing strategies. And we know that Welsh government have begun work on the community food strategy for the whole of Wales, which will encourage local authorities to act on community management of green spaces. Right, the hooks really for public bodies to support community managed green spaces. It's a busy slide, and it's meant to be, because, you know, there's no escaping in Wales now that the hooks and ways that we can take things forward across Wales in our public policy and processes. Given the widespread climate and nature emergencies across Wales, there's plenty support for highly effective managed green spaces, and for communities to do that if resources and capacity and local authorities do not allow for it. To us at Social Farms and Gardens, I think it's an obvious opportunity for housing developers to provide those spaces alongside play areas and affordable housing and schools. And it is more about being effective custodians of land, of green spaces, than sort of taking over and being owners of it. Being one myself a few years back, I believe new housing development occupiers are in prime position to manage green spaces on their doorstep. And it's an opportunity that we must not miss here in Wales. Sorry, I'm going too far forward. How do I go back? Yes, so just wanted to touch on, there's some evidence, some recent evidence as well. The Institute of Welsh Affairs reports released earlier this year provides evidence of the experience of communities in Wales around community asset transfer. All communities interviewed described painstakingly long and prohibitive processes, and it calls for shake-up in Wales so that communities can gain access to public land more easily. The next slide is talking about a standard for allotments and growing spaces. It's a case we have presented to Fields Interest. So like the famous 6 acre standard, perhaps there could be a standard for growing spaces according to the number of people in a ward. And this suggestion is not meant to be a burden for local authorities to have to provide spaces themselves. Like local authorities are so often able to provide new playing fields, this is a tool for funding and for developers to provide flexible green spaces, so that food growing of different types and community management of different types can be options on new housing developments. And it doesn't have to be Fields Interest. We have enough evidence here in Wales now so that any authority or land manager could use this sort of notion. Just quickly moving on to lessons learned from me. I think it's, I acknowledge, you know, we do acknowledge in Social Farms and Gardens, it's not easy to trust communities to manage spaces, and it's always something that should be considered carefully. But one of the first things that I look for in projects is to make sure that it's not just 1 or 2 people taking forward a project, that is fully supported by the people on the doorstep of the scheme. And the project is representative of that local community. We need to let them design and grow the space for themselves. and find out their plans for the site, who will use it, who will benefit, what do they want to do with the space, and how are they going to be organised. The group needs to be constituted and having a bank account to acquire funding, and long leases does require them. I would recommend to be a community interest company, or a legal entity of some kind, rather than signing leases in personal names. Remember that in urban areas, sometimes deprived, the benefits could be wide-ranging, so proportionate processes are needed. Although groups need to be able to articulate what they want to do, they shouldn't have to write long business plans. A short management plan should be required. This image here is the Railway Garden project in Splot, which showed an exemplary approach of how green space projects in deprived areas can be presented. But that was a long battle to gain access to the land. And I do worry that less articulate groups will struggle to get their case across effectively enough for council processes. And I suppose that's where social farms and gardens can help. I think the supporters and allies do need to work together as a team, and public sector not be scared to work with the third sector. Working with communities every day means we're able to tell a community project of merit from a one-man band with a point to prove. Sometimes it is hard for projects to work out, or it's hard to work out projects, I should say. We can support them at Social Farms and Gardens to set up a constitution and be inclusive, and to complete a resilience plan so you have a really good idea of what they're all about. I'm going to save the last word for a lady called Amanda Davis from Swansea Bay University Health Board. She provided some sort of lessons learned and things that to take note of going forward if others want to do what she's done, which is to provide land around Morrison Hospital for a community supported agriculture social enterprise. And I think one of the main messages I got from what she's saying here is that community, it's the NHS that doesn't have to deliver this, and local authority doesn't have to deliver it. Communities can deliver it for you. Talks about working with allies and looking for policies and strategies to support your cause, and to be patient, really. So I hope I haven't gone too much over time. I just wanted to end really on that we'd like to hear your examples and experiences, so please do share them via the chat or email with me, and likewise, if you want to work with us, if you're not sure about a community project or you feel they need more support, do get in touch. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Lucy, thank you so much for that. That was really fascinating, and you've managed to encapsulate in 20 minutes everything that I've learned in about 30 years of working with local communities. So some of the stuff you got in there is absolute gold dust. There's been a lot of activity on the chat. I did post one question at the start, and that is, if you had to pick the most significant benefit of community managed green space for the participants, what would it be, and why?
I think improvement in physical and mental health, probably. Just being able to connect with people and nature is absolutely invaluable to communities and to individuals of all kinds. Yes. and just gaining that, and then they gain the value, of nature and want to work with it more, and it just sort of goes from there, really.
That's fascinating. And that resonates with a lot of my experiences right from the very start of my conservation career. Matt Stowe has got the next question, He's saying, are you able to help with community managed conservation spaces? So Matt, would you?
Cool, thank you, Lucy. Yeah, my question is, because I'm familiar with your organisation and the work that you do, you know, around kind of community gardens, but I just wondered if that support extends to community managed conservation spaces, which is a recent thing that I've come across.
Yeah, well, like in terms of biodiversity.
In terms of a patch of woodland, there's
we
some
do.
interest from a guy in kind of taking that on, but I didn't really feel as though I had the experience to kind of support him in these initial stages. So I wondered if that was something that you guys can help out with.
Yeah, I mean, Llais Godwig, the community woodland organisation, are obviously experts in helping groups get started out. Llais Godwig, they're called. But in terms of accessing land, if there are any issues around that, you know, just whether they, you know what they're doing in terms of signing up to agreements and getting the right agreement in place. That's something we can certainly help with. But yeah, we always alert people to Llais Godwig, the community managed woodland people. But yeah, we're as a sort of access to land supporter and advisor, that we do cover woodlands as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lucy. Joanna Lane had got a question about evaluation. Joanna, can I ask you to unmute and turn your camera on? And Joanna's just unmuting now. Should be the little microphone icon down on my screen. It's down at the bottom left-hand corner.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. That's great.
So my question is about the health impacts that you were talking about, the health benefits. And we're doing some work in NRW at the moment to develop our approach to health impact assessments. And I suppose in some of our grants programs and some of our own projects where there's elements of community involvement in land management or green space, often we know there are health benefits, but I think we're still developing some of the evaluation methods around how we can measure that. Because first of all, how we can communicate that really clearly with communities, and then how we can evaluate it. So I just wonder if you've got any insight into that.
Yeah, obviously the social prescribing projects that, you know, we've got a couple here in Cardiff actually through Grow Cardiff. I want to speak to Isla Horton, who runs Grow Cardiff. She's helped set up a couple of social prescribing projects where, and I think perhaps there may be some evaluation around the benefits that those users of the spaces are experiencing. It's one of those less tangible things, isn't it? But which is why we went down the film route, because what better way really to articulate it is by getting them to tell people. Obviously there's the health impact assessments as well, and there are studies, you know, and have been studies done around sort of the health impacts. Perhaps it's something that I can perhaps provide some sources for you after today around the research that's been done and what else is going on, isn't it? Does that sound okay?
That would be great. Yeah, I'll get in touch.
Yeah, I'll just make a note.
That's absolutely brilliant. The more you speak, the more I realise what a depth of knowledge your organisation and you personally have got about all of these issues, and just that huge network of contacts that you have around Wales and the wider UK, especially up in Scotland.
Yeah, it wasn't like this 9 years ago when I first joined, I can assure you. But that's right. The job becomes easier every day because you're experiencing and gaining so much knowledge. And yeah, it becomes it's a joy then to do the job, you know.
So if you had to pick a project that's outside of Wales that we could learn from, where we could bring information and knowledge into Wales, are there any that immediately spring to mind?
I think it's a combination of different movements really that are going on. I mean, the incredible edible movement around started in Todmorden. Not that I'm an advocate of guerrilla gardening and just going along and just starting to garden, but their philosophies around sort of the social and business sort of, you know, those sorts of benefits are, you know, they do speak volumes. But the stuff going on in Brighton, London, and there's some amazing projects in London. City Bridge is a project that we've got funding for. Amber, my colleague in London, some of the stuff they're doing there. I think one of the projects that had the biggest impact on me at the time was the King's Cross skip garden. It was a meanwhile use, and I'd like to see more of that sort of thing where, you know, sites are being safeguarded from, you know, for development in the future. And they approached the developer and all their gardens were in skips and movable containers, and then when the site was ready for development, they moved them on to another site. So that was quite an inspiring thing. Yes, I think we're running out of time.
We're about to be cut off. So Lucy, if you'd
recheck
like to
the
dial
link.
back in, that would be fantastic. But for those that have to leave now, I'd just like to say thank you so much for a fascinating presentation.